And we're heading closer to Christmas, and it's going to be a tough Christmas for some families, particularly those on benefits. And well, adding to the Christmas stress, recently been announced, as in fact reported yesterday in the ODT, that almost a quarter of beneficiaries have been incorrectly paid. Now, some of them underpaid, but even for those that are overpaid, this causes a huge stress. Joining me on the program now from the Social Policy Unit of the Salvation Army, Ana, kia ora, good morning.
Well, then, Andrew, thanks for having me.
You'd think, actually, if somebody overpays you just before Christmas, that's fantastic news. Not such good news, though, because despite the fact that for overpaid beneficiaries, this is not their fault, this can happen over a period of time, and then they're stuck with a huge bill that they need to pay back on a very limited income.
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of that it walk through our front doors in regards to financial mentoring, and a lot of families who just weren't aware that they were being overpaid. And a lot of it has to do is because they don't know what they're entitled to, but then they're sort of stuck in a place where they're in debt to the government and having to pay back working income, and that comes out of their benefit, which is already low as it is. So be able to have to take money out of their benefit levels just pushes that financial hardship even further.
When it comes to those that are underpaid, now I think what in terms of the specific numbers, almost a quarter. What's that? Do you know what that looks like in terms of actual numbers? How many people in this category?
Oh, I'm not sure. When saw the article, I wasn't really surprised because the Manukau Salvation Army is really, really fortunate that for many years we've had WINS worker that's on site with us two
Okay.
days a week. I mean, so often we would send our whānau to go and have a chat to her, and she would pick up so many of our whānau just weren't being paid or were paid less than what they were entitled to. And
Yeah.
so she was able to work through that. But it's really rare to have a working income staff member on site in
Yeah.
social services in general. So we're really fortunate to have her, but just to be able to think about, well, what about all of the other centres that don't necessarily have a working income staff member that can work through actually what are the realities of the struggles that they're going through and what are they entitled to. So we see it frequently, very frequently, through our front doors,
Yeah.
the number of families that are underpaid.
When it comes to underpaid, if that is discovered, does back pay kick in? If they go, gosh, we've been underpaying you for years, here's a lump sum. Does that ever happen?
Not necessarily, not to my knowledge, it doesn't necessarily happen. I think the sort of the burden of proof for our whānau, like you need to it would have to need a lot of documents,
Yeah.
need a lot of paperwork, need a lot of admin. I mean, our whānau are just not in that position to be able to track back as long as they need to go to get those back payments. And so it's just a matter of ensuring from now moving forward that they're paid the amount that they're entitled to.
That doesn't seem fair, really. If you're accidentally overpaid through no fault of your own, you've got a big bill going back as far as you've been overpaid. If you've been underpaid through no fault of your own, then oh well, sorry, we'll try and get it right from here on in, regardless of the fact that they've been overpaid. I mean, that doesn't seem to sit right in terms of justice and fairness.
Yes, it doesn't really make sense logically, but unfortunately, that's sort of the way that it works. And so, unless you've got sort of an advocate that is working alongside you in these processes, and that are fighting to ensure that you're back paid or you're adequately paid or you're paid what you're entitled to, then oftentimes a lot of those who are in working income or are on beneficiaries who have been beneficiaries just that they don't they just they've got more, I guess, more pressing issues or more pressing complex needs that they're facing. And
Yeah.
so having to go through all of that administration, unfortunately, is just not worth it, even though
Mm.
it would alleviate a lot of those financial issues that they're facing.
This situation also seems to be worse statistically than last year, and a long way from government targets of saying 95% accuracy in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back down to, and it's with a lot of systems, when you're trying to ensure efficiency, and when the bottom line is you need to see this many clients at this many time, KPIs, all of those things, is that caseworkers unfortunately don't have the luxury to be able to sit with a family and unpack sort of what's going on,
Yeah.
what are the issues. It's sort of surface level, and unfortunately, sometimes that's on working income, and sometimes that's just the environment that's been created for working income to be able to work in.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and so that means you can't dig deeper into a family situation to be able to find out the realities, to be able to ensure that they're paid what they're entitled to. So I think in our perspective, it's sort of a systems issue, as well as just not taking the time to find those complex issues.
And hey, it's good to have measurements. It's good to have some KPIs. It's good to have a target to say, hey, this level of accuracy is unacceptable. We need to do much better than that. The government's been clear on that. But I suppose moving beyond the statistics, the numbers, the KPIs, for you guys at the Salvation Army, of course, you're meeting the people with the stories, with the heartbreak, with for some of them facing a pretty tough Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in regards to KPIs and numbers and data, those are important in regards to accountability, particularly when you're looking at government funding and ensuring that what the government is funding you to do is what organizations are doing.
Yep.
But at the same time, when for us here at the Salvation Army, when we work with really complex families, outcomes aren't always binary. It isn't just, they're homeless this day and then we put them in the house the next day.
Yep.
And if we don't put them in a house, that means we've sort of failed. But that sort of you haven't looked at sort of the progress or the process in which this family, even though they've come out of homelessness, even helping our families with things like filling out tenancy forms, or keeping the house clean, or ensuring there's no property damage. Like
Yep.
those are sort of incremental wins for us. But when we're looking at the KPI or the measurement, it's like you need to move them into successful, stable housing. But there's sort of a process in that, and there's progress in that. And if you don't meet that KPI within that particular time frame, then it's sort of seen as a failure. But
Wow.
if you're able to work with the family over a series of weeks, and able to get them to a state where they're looking after the properties, they're attending financial mentor meetings, those are not by that doesn't often translate as that success, but to us that's success because
Yep.
that's progress. And so if we're sort of just looking at binary outcomes, there's a whole bunch of there's a whole heap of the story that you've completely missed out on, that are successes, but they're just not the ultimate success that we were looking for.
That's a really,
Particularly when we're looking at complex families,
yeah.
ultimate transformation takes time, and that needs to be acknowledged. And if we're just looking for measurements and everything, then we lose sort of those nuanced progresses that our families are achieving.
I mean, that's a really good perspective. And honestly, there's a lot of hope in that because, okay, yep, we're not ticking the box on job done, as it were, but there's some things to celebrate on that journey. Hey, we're not finished, praise God that he's not finished with us yet either.
Yeah,
We're,
absolutely.
we're making small steps on that journey. But hey, we're heading in the right direction in that regard. And I suppose, yeah, you see a lot of sad stories. You see a lot of tough stuff at the Salvation Army. But these smaller wins, these steps in the right direction, the turning away from some of the destructive parts of their lifestyle and making better choices, these are all things to be celebrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, human beings, we're not perfect.
Yeah.
Only Christ is perfect. And it's very much like, you take one step back, you take three steps forward, one step back. It's not always just a straightforward linear path. It's often circular, and sometimes you go around in circles,
Yeah.
and sometimes you pause. And that's just human nature. And I think if we're measuring just the linear path, then we've completely missed a whole part of the picture, and because we're not being able to capture sort of that circular round and round, pausing up and down, that is very much part of human nature.
Yeah.
That's what it's like for us. And so it's really important to acknowledge those little wins, and also to acknowledge, those failures, but the fact that people get back up, because
Yep.
it's really hard to get back up. That resilience level is really lacking in society. And so when people are getting back up and continuing to try, we shouldn't drop people because they fell.
Yeah.
If they're willing to get back up, we should always be beside them to help them. Because we were sinners, and yet Christ died for us whilst we were in our sin.
Yeah.
And so that's our responsibility to show that to the world as well.
Hey, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do, working alongside people, as you say, some of them with complex backstories, some difficult things that they're facing, some mountains to climb, but doing so with support, one step at a time. That's certainly something to celebrate as we head towards Christmas. And also just wanting to give a shout out to you guys, the Salvation Army, doing brilliant work at Christmas. If you wanted to support their work, their Christmas appeal, check it out, salvationarmy.org.nz. And I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.